Today marks the 16th anniversary of the beginning of the Iraq War. It is the single biggest tragedy of my political lifetime and an incredibly formative experience. I was 23 years old when we set out to invade Iraq, and I watched as, in an atmosphere of fear after 9/11, leaders in power manipulated the public to forge an incredibly robust elite consensus that we had to undertake something that seemed to me and many at the time, and seems ever more so now, as indefensibly wrong. But so many smart experts told us we had to do it, that Saddam was a threat, that he had weapons of mass destruction. And the Bush administration, more than any other single entity, of course, used its power to manipulate and cherry-pick intelligence to scare the public into war. Of course, millions of people dissented and took to the streets. I was among them. And we were right. And the so-called experts and politicians and editorial boards and columnists, they were all wrong. The cost of that war was nearly 5,000 American service members' lives, trillions of US dollars, and the lives of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. Hundreds of thousands of fellow human beings, of men, women, and children dead because of the events that our nation set in motion. Prisoners tortured in Abu Ghraib, children shot dead in front of their parents in a city square by mercenaries, and 16 years later, we still live with the consequences, though not as much as Iraqis do. And yet, remarkably, with some notable exceptions, the many individuals responsible never really paid any kind of price for it, reputationally, politically. The influential people who advocated for the war and voted for it still have prominent positions. Some have recanted and apologized, recognized the error of their ways, and that really does matter. But the broader lesson here is, when you don't really confront the past, you create conditions that lead to something like the current administration, where Iraq war cheerleader and Uber hawk John Bolton is advising the president. He is the national security advisor, and as we speak, banging the drums of war against both Iran and Venezuela. And unless we deal with this era, the Trump era, differently than we did the era of the Bush administration, history will repeat itself again. In fact, it sort of has already. Right now, you can go to the Worldwide Speakers Group website to book, for a fee, John Kelly, who oversaw a department while they were developing a policy to tear children away from their parents, a man who lied about when he found out that a trusted staffer had been accused of domestic violence by 2 ex-wives and then defended said staffer, who lied about, again in public, about a member of Congress in a desperate attempt to protect the president. And you can now pay to hear that man's wisdom. You know, one of the main lessons of the Trump era is that shamelessness is a kind of political superpower. But the more I think about it, on this day of all days, I realized they learned that from the Iraq war crew. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.